And Chad said, yeah, it was a great interview, blah, blah. And I said, what do you think the title will be? What do you think the main punchline will be? How they'll promote the interview? And he said, shit, man, you were on the cover of Time, Newsweek. He's like, it's going to be awesome. I said, it'll be about drinking, and it'll be about skiing drunk or something like that. And he remembers it like, he was like, no. He's like, no way.
How do you view the media?
Not very favorably for the most part. I think we're in a really tough phase of evolution or development at this point. You know, social media and the way how quickly things have become where they are, I think is problematic. I think people don't have the right moral compass, and I don't think they have the right responsibility or accountability. You know, I think it's easy to throw stones, you know, in the media, and not necessarily for specific people, but just in general. And you see it now a lot with, you know, it used to be bullying was only if you could do it in person. How else the hell could you bully somebody? Now, the way social media is, you're seeing people they feel like they have the anonymity to attack anybody or say whatever they want. And really the damage to reputation and to the emotional damage that can be done now is so much more extreme and so much harder to regulate and so much more prolific, I think, than it was 20 years ago, that it's going to take a while for people's conscience and morals to catch up with that. And I think that certainly goes all the way through the media. I think, you know, people ask, they think it's their job, or they can justify it any way they want to, and the reaction that they get sort of justifies the means that they get. It's a job and they're trying to make money and they're doing what they need to do. But in the end, it's it's a responsibility. You don't want to airing people's dirty laundry or poking at people or, you know, compromising what the impressions that you can give are is all very commonplace now. And I think that's eventually probably it's got to change. I just think, you know, we're in a tough phase right now. Like I said, it's an evolution that has to be managed, and I don't think right now it's being managed very well.
Coming into the 2006 Olympics, you do a 60 Minutes piece where obviously you talked about skiing wasted and at least, you know, extremely hungover at a World Cup event. What would the Bode now say to the younger version of yourself then?
Nothing. I mean, I think the context of that was the whole point. It was right. Chad Fleischer was on the team with me at the time, where he was just switching out of being an active ski racer and he was doing media stuff, and he would happen to be there. And the whole interview, it was all about, you know, the Olympics, leading up to the Olympics, such an amazing culmination of all the hard work that I'd done. And the previous season, I'd won the overall World Cup for the first time in 25 years, and you know, my upbringing and my family and my foundation, which I'd already been doing at the time.
It was a great story.
It was a lot of really positive stuff. I talked about that story of when I got drunk the night before the last thing to celebrate with the biggest accomplishment of my career, and you know, and then that I skied the slalom the next day and I was hungover. You know, I was feeling pretty bad, but that was it. I was just pretty beat up. I wasn't drunk at all. I was, you know, 12 in the afternoon by the time I skied, but I was definitely hungover. And Chad said, yeah, it was a great interview, blah, blah. And I said, what do you think the title will be? What do you think the main punchline will be? How they'll promote the interview? And he said, shit, man, you were on the cover of Time, Newsweek. He's like, it's going to be awesome. I said, it'll be about drinking, and it'll be about skiing drunk or something like that. And he remembers it like, he was like, no. He's like, no way. He's like, no chance will they do that. And I said, I guarantee you they'll do it. And the guy who did the interview, what's his name with the white hair?
Bob Simon?
Bob, yep. He almost quit over it. He was so upset because I talked to him.
Oh,
you should ask him about it, because okay. I said, you know, you really shouldn't ask questions like that, because for someone like me, I'm not ashamed of what I did. I would do it again. I think, you know, my whole family was there. I wasn't hiding it from anyone. But you can't not tell the world that in a way that makes it seem like something you should be ashamed of. You just can't do it. Your editors are going to absolutely put that as the thing. And he was like, definitely they won't. I won't let them. And I said, you can throw it in there. I don't care if people hear about it. I thought it was one of the highlights of my athletic career was winning that, and celebrating that only makes sense. But
Did you intentionally talk about that to see what would happen?
And I told him. I said, because I wanted to know,
yourself?
Because the integrity of media had always been in question in my mind. I felt like there was no integrity. I felt like if there was profits to be made, regardless of what the story was or where, you know, that people would bite, that they would take the profits over the truth every time. You had to dumb down your message and be so generic and so manipulative in your ability to communicate to maintain, a specific brand without letting them have an alternate route that they could run down, it defeated the whole purpose. So it was essentially, I always would do that. I would always poke and throw things out there just as a test and as a way to probably justify some of my displeasure at doing the stuff that I had to do, because it was obvious.
Your issue wasn't on them putting it in there. Your issue was on how it was promoted.
Yeah, just a basic integrity. It was basically like the story was what it was. Bob Simon had gone to my house. He'd spoken to my parents. He knew the story from them as well. He thought that they would have more integrity than that, and that's why he almost quit over it. He tried, he fought for it, and they said you can leave, but this is the way it's going to be.
With at least the reported partying over your career, to what extent was there a period of time where you were burning the candle a lot at both ends?
I think basically my whole life. I've always been doing that. I was the kind of kid who I had 6 different groups of friends. I had skateboarder, more party friends. I had much older skier friends who were just ski bums. I had tennis and soccer friends who played sports all the time. I had my family, my sisters, and my closest friends who sometimes didn't do any of those things. I'd skateboard with those guys for 5 hours. Then I'd go play a soccer game, in the afternoon, and come back and try to play tennis with my tennis camp guys at night under the lights. So that's hard to let go of because it's all
but there's a difference.
Really fun.
There's a difference
really
between
enjoyable.
Doing that though and like going out and getting wasted before or the night before.
There's no difference at all, actually. It's just the same thing. It's doing all the things that people love to do. That's been my biggest mantra over this time is like, if you have an awful time and then you get a gold medal at the end of it, what does that mean to you? The gold medal represents a terrible time. Like, what's the point of that? Unless you're willing to totally take everyone else's opinion of what that gold medal means and have that supersede the entire experience of getting there. And I just was never capable of doing that. So for me, the times where I went out and partied, it wasn't like I was torturing myself, and I always managed it. I didn't, I was always in the process of managing it, but I just was not willing to not do stuff because everyone else told me that I shouldn't. I always wanted to make the decision for myself. And like I said, I wouldn't trade it for anything. I think I made a lot of mistakes probably, but I made a lot of really good decisions also.
The most kind of biting piece of criticism or quote I read about you in preparing for the interview actually came from your uncle, who was also your coach, who once said about you, despite being the most successful American skier ever, he's the biggest underachieving ski racer in history by a long shot. Your thoughts?
Oh, I don't even think it makes any sense at all. Is it possible that I would have won more races had I made myself miserable in the pursuit of winning more races? I don't know. I think I would have quit when I was 25 or 23. The way that most ski racers did, and the way that you see tons of athletes who are hyper-focused and hyper-driven, or who have slave driver parents or slave driver coaches. If he had been in charge, what he would have done. He would have had me, in bed by 6:30 and up like the East Germans. And, unfortunately, yes, that can produce great athletes to a point, but if the motivation isn't coming from inside, they certainly aren't still ski racing at 37 years old, And I think there's a much bigger picture that he doesn't recognize. But he doesn't see underachieving in terms of what my actual overall impression was, which has been impactful for a lot of people. And it's been impactful for my sport, and it's been impactful for parents and for grandparents. And that, I think, is my achievement. It's not just winning medals. And I think if you sacrifice the living that I did in between winning medals and winning World Cups, you don't have nearly the same impact on the world or the same overall impression for people in the legacy. And that is, I think, something that Mike just will never get. By saying I'm an underachiever, he's only looking at one narrow part of what makes a human being or what makes a career or what makes a life. And that's just, I feel bad for him, because that's the least of what my concerns are.
Your professional accomplishments are as good as they could have been given the level of personal satisfaction you wanted to have.
Given what I want in my life, given the person that I am. And that's, I think, and the biggest accomplishment you can have after a career like that is saying that you became and you were the person you wanted to be throughout that, you know, process. And some people, it is one way, and some people it's the other. I don't think there's any wrong answer in there, but you have to be able to say that I did what I thought was the right thing to do, and I am the person that I wanted to become, and I tried to pursue that throughout. And you know, that I think is singularly the most, you know, I think important accomplishment that you can come out of a sports career with is that development, because it really is it's a maturation process.